Age is just a number. Hi there, Coach Sage with SageRunning.com here with another training talk. Today we're going to talk about evolving as a runner, and we'll talk about age considerations as you get older, as you mature as a runner, but also physiological changes and variables that may influence your training, what is optimal training, and event distance focus that you might progress in as you make this journey into running. So let's get started. So first of all, obviously, I know a lot of you on here are older than me in terms of chronological age. A lot of people in their late 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, even some runners chiming in that are in their 70s. Kudos to you. I want to be like you when I grow up. If I could still be running at any level when I'm in my 70s, that would be awesome. That's a big goal in my life. But on the other end of the spectrum, we have runners that are younger than me. Maybe you're a young whippersnapper, you're in school, middle school, high school, college, or you're in your 20s, you're 20-something, millennial. This still could apply to you, so hopefully you guys could get something out of this. So when I'm talking about older runners, we have to discern the difference between your chronological age, but the age of how you are when you started running, or what's your running age? How many years have you been training fairly consistently, mostly year-round, and at what level, whether it's 30 miles a week, 50K per week, or you've built up to 100K per week, 60 miles a week, or even more. And in our experience coaching athletes, Coach Sandy and I do coach a lot of athletes that are in their late 30s, early 40s, and 50s. So we too kind of relate to what it's like to be a little bit older, to be on the masters running scene, and to make improvements even at that age. And I'll get into that in the second half of this talk. So your training age, your running age, has a big influence on how you could progress and how you can make gains as you develop as a runner, because there are some physiological variables at play. And for someone like me, I'm probably a bad example. Most of you, I assume, did not start running super seriously in middle school and have been doing it for the last 20 years, year-round. I didn't play any other sport after I quit soccer. I was focused on running, and for the last 10 years, I've run a lot of 100-mile weeks, 160K per week, and taken it very, very seriously for especially the last 15 years of my life. So my margin for progression is a lot smaller. My gains are very smaller if I even make them or get back to my PRs, especially at the shorter distances. And we'll get into distance event focus and training for that in the second half of this talk as well. But for me, the gains are going to be very marginal. I'm at that age now where it's going to be really hard for me to PR at the 5K or 10K, and it would take a very specific training focus just because I've been running those events for so long, and I've trained at such a high level relative in terms of mileage, at least, for such a long time. Whereas if you just started running maybe in your 40s or your 50s, maybe you quit smoking or you lost some weight and you started running, you can make huge gains later in life because your running age is only a couple years old. Maybe you're only 5 years old as a runner and you're slowly been building up, and you did your first marathon in 3:50, but then you cut down to 3:30, and then you're at 3:20, and then you're looking at a Boston qualifying time, something like that. You can still make huge gains later in life. Same thing if you're a young whippersnapper. You're still growing in your teens, even into your 20s. You could mature a lot as a runner, and you've got youth on your side, relative youth. So you can make really big gains, but it just depends on your training and how your body reacts to it. But there are some considerations if you're a bit older or on the older side of what types of training might be better versus if you're a young whippersnapper, and we'll get into that. All right, so the general trend, and I say general because it obviously depends on what event you want to do, but as you get older, as you mature as a runner, and as you get older in general, you generally want to move up in event distance. Some people, there's some natural physical things that are going to help you do that I'll get into in a minute here, but generally, if you start off running a 5K or 10K, then you want to do a half marathon. And then maybe after you do a half marathon, you say, hey, I want to do a full marathon. And then you start doing marathons and you want to do an ultra marathon, 50K or something like that. And as you get older, that's kind of a natural progression. Same thing when I started running track in school. In middle school, I tried to be a sprinter at first. I wasn't very good at sprinting. After 400, getting beat in a lot of 400-meter races, I realized I should do the 800. Then I was doing the 1500. Then 3K, 5K, and running half marathons in high school and things like that. So it will depend on some genetics, though. There's some genetic factors. You might be a more explosive type of athlete. You might have great sprinting power. You might want to do a sprint, or you might want to try to focus on running a sub 6-minute mile or 6-minute 1500 when you're a masters runner or something like that, and that might change your event focus. You might get hurt if you try to do really high mileage marathon training, or you might not have time for it. So lower intensity is more directed at the lower events, and it's kind of like the 10,000 hour rule, so to speak. It's not really, but if you accumulate more lifetime miles and you have more mileage base under your belt and under your legs, especially if it's uninterrupted, consistent training for months and months and years, then it's easier to do well and get closer to your maximum potential in the longer distance races where hard work really does pay off. I don't have the genetics to run a really fast 100-meter sprint, and I wouldn't run sprinters who run 100 meters wouldn't do a bunch of high mileage, whereas in the 5K, 10K, all these aerobic-based long-distance races, marathons, you need that. The better the mileage pace and the more consistent you could be and healthy in the long run, the more you're going to be able to progress. Now, as we get older, there's physiological changes that kind of work against us, but you could still be setting great PRs in your 40s and 50s or even older if you started running later in life, or if you started from modest training background. Now, the first thing is a drop, and this is for guys. There's hormonal changes for all runners, and most notably testosterone is going to drop as you get older. As a guy, there's other hormonal changes for women as well that I won't talk about, but that's one thing kind of working against you. VO2 max, your maximum aerobic capacity, your ability to deliver oxygen to your working muscles, is also going to drop with age. This is not a secret. Your maximum heart rate, how many beats per minute you could beat to move around oxygenated blood, is dropping with age. On average, the general formula for max heart rate is not accurate. 220 minus your age. Well, as your age gets greater, max heart rate is dropping, so you have less beats per minute. You could increase the amount of blood your heart beats, the stroke volume, but generally max heart rate's dropping, VO2 max is dropping, and as you get older and you have these hormonal changes, you have loss in some muscle mass maybe, you could also be gaining muscle mass though, depends how you work out, then it theoretically is going to slow down your events, and you're going to notice your performances slow down more in the shorter distance events first. So mile, 5K, I don't know a whole lot of professional runners that are in their mid-40s that run super fast, competitive, world-class 1500 or miles, and even at the 5K you start to look at moving up, whereas you could be like Meb and rocking the New York City Marathon in around the age 40, running 2:10 marathon as a masters, which is just amazing. And in the longer distances and ultras, we see great ultra runners doing 100 milers that are well into their 40s, and they're competing on the world stage. So that's another general trend, is you could still do really well in long distance events even at older ages, whereas your sprint speed and your short distance track speed and VO2 max are kind of dropping off. Other factors is recovery time. As you get older, you could be more prone to pulling a muscle or injury. You lose some flexibility as you age, but it may be from working at your desk with bad form for years and years and years, staring at computer screens, driving, work, commute in car, you start getting some back problems, things like that. So it's a little harder sometimes to recover from high intensity sessions than when you were in your 20s or something like that. So you're developing specific training so that you could be consistent, but you need to always be healthy, and you need to balance your training more and probably look at that more as you age, and things like nutrition become really important because your metabolism's also changing. So you could get away with eating a bunch of pizza and beer maybe in your early 20s. Well, in your 40s, your metabolism is a little slower, so eating the same amount of pizza and beer might take away some of your six-pack abs or something like that a little bit more. So healthy eating and nutrition becomes more important as you age. It's always pretty important, but it definitely, there's some metabolic changes that occur. The other factors with training as you age is that generally, and I found this myself, is I need a little bit more time to warm up, do some flexibility drills and strides before launching into an all-out speed workout so I don't pull a muscle. There's a little bit less flexibility, it appears, and it takes a little while to get going. But a thorough warm-up is always part of a good routine before a high-intensity speed session and things like that. The other thing is with recovery time. Maybe you used to be able to only have one easy day or one recovery day between hard high-intensity workouts. As masters runners and older runners, sometimes it's better and more optimal to take 2 easy recovery days, or take an extra day off from training a week, do some more cross training and things like that. Because the high intensity workouts take a lot out of you and they're very demanding, you need to still balance that with very easy, slow recovery days, slower paces, relaxed running, or even non-impact running and things like that. But always be aware of pain and biomechanical inefficiencies and aches, because you don't want that to turn into an injury. Now the good news, it's not all downhill necessarily as you get older, and like I said, if you just started running and you're relatively young as a runner, you have a lot of upside, and you could still be setting your PRs even at shorter distances as you get older, because you do get benefits, namely in the fact of running economy or efficiency. You develop certain form, you develop certain neuromuscular patterns, you develop better ways to transport blood to your working muscles, mitochondria size and density, powerhouse of the cell, blood flow, capillary bed density, and that comes through accumulated miles. And you put more miles on your legs, you start training consistently for months on end, you develop a better aerobic base, you could be getting more efficient, and you could be doing really well and improving. Even though your top end speed isn't improving, your VO2 max isn't improving, you've developed this more efficiency in your running style and your running stride, and your ability to utilize oxygen on the run, especially at 10K, half marathon, marathon types of distances. And so that could be a real benefit. You can make huge gains later in life just by doing that, accumulating more miles and being consistent. At the same time, you also gain experience. You gain mental experience. You become more in tune with your body. You read race scenarios where you learn to pace yourself better. You know how to manage your hydration, nutrition better, different race conditions. You know what to expect on different courses, maybe if you're running a marathon or something like that. So you gain wisdom, hopefully with age, and experience, and you can improve that running economy. And that's really beneficial and could motivate you, but at the same time, you know, I know I'm gonna get older and I'm gonna slow down eventually. I wanna do this sport as long as possible, as competitive as possible, and I love it. I love the running community, but there are some things to take into consideration as you get older, as you develop and mature as a runner. Hopefully it's a great journey and it's a rewarding process. Thanks so much for subscribing on here, really appreciate it. We're almost at 100,000 subscribers, great milestone on some award prize giveaways, as well as check out our training plans, sagerunning.com, San NSL plans, any service, any distance. Subscribe on here, check out our playlist videos. Thanks so much guys, hope your running's going well, and stay tuned for more VO2 Max Productions.